Spirits soar. Hearts race. And imaginations run wild. Nobody puts fun into action. Nobody turns vacations into adventures. Nobody brings the motion pictures to life. Nobody like Universal Studios, Florida, where the world rides the movies. But the excitement has just begun. Get ready for the next generation of theme park. Coming in 1999, Universal Studios Islands of Adventure. Explore uncharted territory. Discover unlimited thrills. Live the adventure as never before. For information on vacation packages, call 888-322-5525 or your travel professional. Universal Studios Escape, the Orlando vacation destination for the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to Destinations Disney and Universal, the channel where we discuss everything about the incredible theme parks that made Orlando, Florida, one of the top vacation destinations in the world. Let's return to the 1990s. Following the, let's just say, challenging opening of Universal Studios at the beginning of the decade, Disney believed that they had won the theme park competition in Orlando and started to focus on other Florida competitors, such as SeaWorld and Busch Gardens, deciding to turn its attention towards the construction of Animal Kingdom in order to solidify its place as a top theme park destination in the state of Florida. However, their Orlando rival was not finished just yet. Over the first years of its opening, Universal Studios had worked out the kinks and was slowly becoming a true theme park destination. Understanding that the only way to compete with Disney was to beat them at their own game, Universal moved forward with plans to build a full-scale resort, complete with hotels, shopping, and a second theme park. Project X, as it was called, entered the planning stages as early as 1992. With much of the Orlando lot, which Universal had originally purchased, being vacant even after the construction of Universal Studios, Universal decided to dedicate 110 acres of what was remaining to creating the most technologically advanced theme park in the world. So what challenges did Universal face when creating their second theme park? What were the original ideas? And how many of those ideas made it into the final construction? And what does Islands of Adventure look like today? All these questions and more will be answered in this episode of Destinations Discovery, the incredible Islands of Adventure. The major advantage which Disney had over Universal was that they had a legendary library of animated movies to utilize in their theme parks, which helped Disney to appeal to families with young children. Whereas Universal had a legendary library of live-action films. The attractions for these films, however, could really only be targeted towards adults and teenagers. Aside from Nickelodeon Studios and Hanna-Barbera, Universal Studios did not really have any appeal for one of the largest markets in the world, the family. The Magic Kingdom has always been one of the most popular theme parks in the world because of its ability to draw in families through its family-centered attractions. The only hope that Universal had for theme park survival in Orlando was to create attractions based on animated characters which young children loved. The problem was that Universal had not had an animator or created any animated films since they screwed over a former employee named Walt Disney in the 1920s. It's amazing how one mistake can continue to haunt a company even 70 years after it happened. Following screwing Walt Disney over and stealing his Oswald the Lucky Rabbit cartoon from him, Universal did have some initial success with the character. But that success came at the cost of losing Walt Disney, who Universal thought they could replace very easily. We all know now that that wasn't the truth. Walt Disney went on to open his own company and create his own animated character, which he owned the full rights to, Mickey Mouse, and that caused Oswald to basically fade away into obscurity and forced Universal to focus on making live-action movies instead. So, to summarize, this was a situation which Universal found itself in the 90s. They wanted to compete with Disney, but due to mistakes made decades earlier, they lacked the animated characters and intellectual properties to draw families away from Walt Disney World. The first important move Universal made was hiring Landmark Entertainment Group to design Project X. The true value of this hiring was gaining the creative mind of Gary Goddard. Goddard was a Disney Imagineer who was responsible for many of the designs and concepts of the Magic Kingdom and of EPCOT. Goddard left Disney in order to form his own company and later found himself working with Landmark. So, with a legendary former Imagineer on board and in charge of designing the park, Universal began to acquire the necessary IPs in order to let Goddard work his creativity. The first major IP which Universal was able to secure was for the cartoons created by Jay Ward. Following his death in 1989, Jay Ward's family inherited the rights to all of his cartoons, who then auctioned those rights off in 1991, an auction which was won by Universal. This gave Universal the rights to iconic cartoon characters such as Dudley Do-Right and Rocky and Bullwinkle. The next cartoon Universal wanted was owned by King Features. King Features owned the rights to many classic comic strips, but the true prize of the collection was Popeye. After tense negotiations, Universal secured the rights to use Popeye the Sailor in the parks. The animated IPs which Universal acquired would be used in the Toon Lagoon section of the park. Popeye, being a sailor, became a natural fit for a water-based attraction, and using the IPs acquired from the family of Jay Ward, another water-based attraction was created based on Dudley Do-Right. So, with one of the theme lands' design and IPs completed, Universal turned its attention to creating the second theme land of Project X. Very early in the planning stages, Universal approached Dr. Seuss's widow about acquiring the rights to use the legendary characters from the books in the park. Universal was initially denied. The issue was that the Seuss family was notorious for never taking any type of licensing or merchandise deals. This was because Dr. Seuss was concerned that doing so would cause his characters to become oversaturated. The fear which his widow had was that the characters from Dr. Seuss's books would be used in a carnival-based theme park. It took an all-expenses-paid trip to Orlando and showing her every detail of the ideas for the land in order to finally convince her to sell Universal the rights in 1995. With those 3 deals secured, Universal's mission to appeal to the family demographic in order to compete with Disney was becoming a reality. With 2 lands now completely secured and planned out, Universal turned its attention to the teen and adult demographic for the park in order to maintain the strides they had made towards that population with Universal Studios. So, the next land would be Gotham City, complete with a Batman vs. Penguin ride. Batman had become a must-have IP after the hit 1989 film starring Michael Keaton. The other section of the land will be based on Superman, complete with a 3D motion simulator ride, which would be one of the most technologically advanced attractions found anywhere in the world. This land entered development and was ready to reach the construction phase when the deal between DC, Warner Brothers, and Universal fell through. DC and Warner Brothers would eventually sell the rights to Six Flags, which is why you can find Batman attractions at Six Flags parks across the country. This turn of events left Universal with just one other option. Securing a deal with the struggling Marvel Comics, who was in dire financial trouble following the successes of its rival DC, with movies based on Superman in the 1980s and Batman in the 1990s. Oh, how times have changed since then. I'm going to spend some time on this contract because out of all the IPs which Universal acquired for Project X, this is the one contract which most affected the theme park landscape in Orlando. As I stated, Marvel was in severe financial trouble in the 1990s. They were essentially relegated to the rapidly declining comic book industry and a few children's animated shows. So, Universal had the upper hand in the negotiations. Marvel was nearing bankruptcy and desperately needed this deal in order to provide an influx of money more than Universal needed Marvel. The first term of the contract was that Universal had to begin construction of the Marvel-based themed land by 1999. This was easily met since the entire park opened up in 1999. Universal paid an undisclosed fee to enter into the agreement. Obviously, with the amount being undisclosed, we do not have the exact figure, but keeping in mind the financial situation Marvel found itself in at the time, this was probably not an insane amount of money. definitely nowhere near to what Disney paid for Marvel in 2009. Once those two conditions were met, Universal owned the exclusivity for all Marvel characters for the first 2 years of the land being open, with an option that if Universal constructed another Marvel-based themed land in another one of their Universal parks, the exclusivity would extend another 5 years. While Universal did construct some rides in other theme parks it owned based around Marvel, it did not meet the terms of this part of the agreement, so the exclusivity ended in 2001. So far, the deal does not seem really all that bad. But there's more. The next part of the contract stated that Universal owns the exclusivity for all characters and family of characters used in a major attraction in the land for all theme parks east of the Mississippi River. So let's look at this part. Marvel Superhero Island includes the following attractions: the Incredible Hulk roller coaster, which was the originally planned Batman and Penguin coaster, now constructed and themed to the Incredible Hulk. The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man, which was the same 3D motion simulator concept as the originally planned Superman attraction, just obviously now themed to Spider-Man. The land also included Doctor Doom's Fearfall and Storm Force Accelerator. So this meant that Universal held the exclusive theme park rights to the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, and the X-Men for all theme parks located east of the Mississippi River. This also means that Disney World was contractually forbidden from including any of these characters or groups of characters in Walt Disney World. The next part of the contract was essentially the clincher, and is what made this deal one of the most lopsided theme park deals ever agreed upon. Universal will continue to hold the rights and the east of the Mississippi River exclusivity for as long as they have a Marvel-themed land in the park, and so long as they do not do anything to severely damage the Marvel brand. Because of Marvel's weak negotiating power when this deal was formulated, they did not have the ability to place a time period on the agreement. So, Universal was able to set those terms. As the years went on, and the Marvel Cinematic Universe came about, which caused Disney to eventually purchase Marvel for $4 billion in 2009, no matter how popular those movies became, or how popular the Marvel Universe becomes, Disney is still forbidden from including the Avengers, or the X-Men, or the Fantastic Four, or Spider-Man, or the Incredible Hulk, or any of those within Disney World. This is where, in a way, Universal actually profits from Disney's labor. Disney makes movies based on the most popular characters, and Universal benefits from this in terms of theme parks because Marvel Superhero Island still exists in the park. Essentially, the more popular those movies become, the more people come to Islands of Adventure because it's the only place where they can experience those incredible characters in a theme park. At the time the deal was constructed, many thought that Universal actually overpaid for the rights. However, over time, this became one of the best deals which Universal had ever made. Universal throwing a direct punch at Disney. As explained in the Expedition to Animal Kingdom video, Disney's fourth theme park, the Animal Kingdom, was originally supposed to include a section called the Beastly Kingdom, which would have been an area based upon animals and stories that existed in the realm of fantasy. Construction of this land would be paused and never completed. The issue was that the cost of Animal Kingdom was going well beyond the anticipated budget, so Disney had to decide whether to build the enormous Beastly Kingdom or construct the smaller and less expensive Dinoland USA. Due to Disney being in the process of creating a movie based on dinosaurs, Dinoland USA was constructed and Beastly Kingdom was placed on hold and ultimately would never be constructed at all. The area set aside for Beastly Kingdom would remain abandoned until the opening of Pandora in 2019. The decision to not construct Beastly Kingdom angered many Imagineers, and between the failure of Euro Disneyland and other creative differences with Michael Eisner, the Beastly Kingdom decision was simply the last straw. Many Imagineers left Disney and looked for other employers. Upon hearing about this, Universal issued a press statement which stated, "Build it here." As a result, many of those Imagineers who quit Disney decided to take their talents to Universal. As a result, many of the ideas for the Beastly Kingdom would be reinvented in order to form the Lost Continent, which was the most detailed themed land in any theme park in the world at the time of its opening. Focusing on mythological animals and heroes from legendary stories, the land features such iconic characters as Sinbad, Merlin, Zeus, Hercules, and more. The former Imagineers also created a walking live show experience, blending live action with incredible water effects, known as Poseidon's Fury. The original Beastly Kingdom concept was supposed to have a suspended roller coaster experience called Dragon's Tower. The former Imagineers evolved this idea into what would become the highlighted attraction of the Lost Continent, Dueling Dragons. The story of Dueling Dragons was kind of similar to the Dragon's Challenge coaster, but with some important changes. The new story was that two dragons had been dueling for all of eternity, leaving the castle-themed queue line looking destroyed and decrepit. Guests would choose to ride either the fire or the ice dragon, and each coaster would have different experiences, but there were 3 points in which the coasters overlapped, simulating the battle between the dragons. This coaster is fondly remembered, and it is one of the most iconic coasters ever constructed. Finally, after years of planning and construction, Project X would open as Islands of Adventure on May 28, of 1999. The $1 billion park was part of the $2.5 billion expansion to Universal Orlando, including the construction of hotels and of City Walk, which is a shopping and nightlife area that connects Universal Studios and Islands of Adventure. Unlike the opening of Universal Studios, which was plagued by ride breakdowns and a whole host of other technical issues, Islands of Adventure's opening would be a huge success. The only issue came with the actual branding of the new resort. Universal decided to brand the entire complex, including the parks, City Walk, and the hotels, as Universal Studios Escape. This name was very confusing and made people believe that the Islands of Adventure was simply an expansion to the Universal Studios park. Keep in mind, everyone, that during this time, the internet was still very much in its infancy. There was no YouTube, no virtual blogs, no real instant access to information. So the way a park was branded and advertised on TV or in newspapers held a huge bearing on the success of a theme park. As a result, the Universal Studios Escape branding caused the theme park to not meet attendance expectations for the first 2 years, until finally, Universal decided to change the name of the resort from Universal Orlando Escape to Universal Orlando Resort. And this name change helped the park to achieve success, becoming the only theme park in the United States to have increased attendance numbers following the 9/11 terrorist attacks. 6 years later, Universal would again capitalize on one of their biggest rivals' blunders. J.K. Rowling signed a letter of intent to bring Harry Potter to Walt Disney World. However, Disney insisted that Imagineers be given creative control over the construction, something which Rowling wanted to have herself. As a result, Rowling withdrew from the Disney deal, and Universal told Rowling the same thing that they told the former Disney Imagineers: build it here. Universal gave Rowling everything she asked for, including full creative control over the construction. And the Wizarding World of Harry Potter was born. Unfortunately, this also meant that the Lost Continent would be drastically reduced in size, and the beloved Dueling Dragons coaster would first be rebranded before being demolished entirely to make room for Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure, which was an attraction that opened in 2019. We'll talk much more about that when we get to that section of the park during the walkthrough. So, through intelligent business decisions, incredible creativity, and immersive storytelling, Universal's Islands of Adventure would grow to become the 9th most visited theme park in the world. With attendance numbers reaching 10,375,000 visitors in 2019, it is currently more popular than Disney's Hollywood Studios, the very same park that Eisner felt had won Disney the theme park competition in Orlando. Islands of Adventure is also still one of the most technologically advanced theme parks in the world today. Speaking of today, let's take a tour around the park, highlighting some of the best rides and experiences. Entering Islands of Adventure is very similar to entering Universal Studios. Guests enter the building with moving platforms and then arrive in City Walk. However, instead of going right, like guests do in order to get to Universal Studios, They will instead go left. They will then walk down that path until they arrive at the port of entry. When entering the port, guests walk under a stone archway with an inscription that reads, "Let the adventure begin." The port is best known for the park icon, Pharaoh's Lighthouse. This lighthouse is designed after the Lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the 7 wonders of the world in ancient times. This area is also known for its Mediterranean architecture, as it is themed after a Middle Eastern bazaar with various restaurants and shops. The backstory of this area holds that ships from diverse origins landed here, drawn in by the Pharaoh's Lighthouse out front, and then came together to create the port. Hence, the architectural hodgepodge representing the coexistence of all the peoples who have arrived at the port of entry and were ready to explore and share their respective cultures. As you walk through the port, you'll find all the typical structures of a trading outpost, including a fire department, a restaurant, and more. Be sure to read the signs for cleverly named theming, such as guest services within the Open Arms Hotel, and make sure you listen to the background audio loops for the voices and music of the port residents. After leaving the port of entry, guests can either go left towards Marvel's Superhero Island, or they can go right towards Seuss Landing. For the purposes of this video, we will begin our journey through the Islands of Adventure at Seuss Landing. The first thing you will notice in this section of the park is how there are no straight lines. When designing this area of the park, Universal had this to say.
I actually had no idea what I was going to get into when I started opening the books, thinking, oh, this is a kid's book. Yeah, we can build this. But when you really start getting into what it means to do that, you realize that a lot of what Geisel drew defies gravity, and it's really not supposed to exist in this world. So we actually had to come up with a way to do that.
Our greatest challenge in building Seuss was really overcoming the propensity for engineers and builders to build everything at right angles and at 90 degrees. There's not a straight line in the entire 12 acres of Seuss Landing.
In order to get the really curvy, wonky, Seussian facades, the building exteriors, what we had to do is use styrofoam, which is a material we see in everyday life. Most of what you see in Seuss Landing is made from styrofoam.
Even the palm trees in Seuss Landing are curvy. Unfortunately, we were able to benefit from a rather tragic thing, Hurricane Andrew. The palm trees that were knocked over continued to grow on the ground in very strange forms. We were able to purchase those trees, brought them here to Seuss Landing, erected them, and they maintained those kind of wonky shapes.
That's right. The Dr. Seuss books contain no straight lines. So, in order to ensure the authenticity of Seuss Landing, there are also no straight lines in this area of the park. This even includes the trees, which, by the way, are actually real. They are trees that were damaged in a hurricane, which Universal purchased and then replanted in this area of the park. Seuss Landing has 6 attractions. If I Ran the Zoo is an interactive children's play area. Oh, the Stories You'll Hear is a musical show based on The Cat in the Hat, Thing 1 and Thing 2, Sam I Am, The Grinch, and The Lorax. One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish is a spinning ride similar to Kang and Kudo's Twirl and Hurl over at Universal Studios. And finally, the 3 attractions we will highlight are the Carousel, the High in the Sky Seuss Trolley Ride, and the signature attraction in this area of the park, the Cat in the Hat. Beginning with the Carousel, you may think it's odd that I would spend time highlighting what looks like a simple carousel ride, but it was the first carousel ride which gave riders creatures to control. Obviously, all the characters which you can ride on this carousel are characters you will find within the books of Dr. Seuss, and they will animate by pulling on their reins or by pushing the lever on their necks, making this a truly unique carousel ride that is a must-do if you have children with you. The next attraction was actually the first one added to Seuss Landing after the park's opening, the High in the Sky Seuss Trolley Train Ride. Interestingly, this was originally supposed to be an attraction called Sylvester McMonkey McBean's Very Unusual Driving Machines, which would have been a monorail-themed ride that took guests above Seuss Landing, where guests could board individual cars whose speed they could actually control themselves. That attraction was very deep in the planning stages, and it even had a tentative opening date for the summer of 2001. However, the manufacturing company Universal hired for the attraction, Seven Lamb, went bankrupt, causing the attraction to be canceled and then finally reworked into the High in the Sky Seuss Trolley Train Ride, which opened in 2006. It is a highly underrated slow-moving dark ride, which chugs along above all of Seuss Landing. This is where you can get some of the best views of the park, including views of Marvel Superhero Island, Jurassic Park, and the Lost Continent, as a narrator rhymes in the background. One of the truly unique features of this attraction are its 2 tracks, which means that there are actually 2 different experiences for guests to enjoy. It is essentially 2 rides, if you want to think of it that way, because there are different narration tracks along the different routes. As you are facing the loading area, the track to the right features the other unique aspect of this ride, directly interacting with another building in Seuss Landing. Right away, you'll find yourself chugging through the Circus McGurkus Cafe Stupendous, one of the themed dining locations within Seuss Landing. Once you exit the restaurant, you'll ride around Seuss Landing and hear the narrator talk all about the park. It's during this section that you unearth the real hidden gem of this ride, the previously mentioned spectacular views. In addition to the tour around Seuss Landing, the ride makes several references to the hit Dr. Seuss book, The Sneetches, and other stories, complete with hidden characters and other fun visuals along the way. Like I said, this attraction, in my opinion, is highly underrated. While it's not what I would call a must ride on my usual rating scale, it is still one that I recommend checking out at least once. The best attraction in Seuss Landing is without a doubt the Cat in the Hat. The signature attraction of Seuss Landing is based on the hit book of the same name. This was also an opening day attraction in 1999. Guests enter the ride through a giant building that resembles the cat's signature hat, marked by the ride's name printed on a crate that contains Thing 1 and Thing 2, with the fish and a cake sitting on top of it. Inside the queue, you will see projectors shining opening text from the book, where the unnamed boy protagonist and his sister Sally can be seen looking out the window. Guests then board a vehicle made of 2 couches, each couch forming a row of seats for the vehicle. The ride goes through the events of the book, with the unnamed boy narrating the entire experience. The Cat in the Hat and the fish also speak at various points throughout the ride. The ride starts with the boy and Sally's mother leaving, before hearing a bump, indicating the cat's presence, as he enters through the front door. The fish, immediately angered by the cat's presence, shouts, "Make that cat go away. You do not want to play. He should not be about when your mother is out." The cat responds by using his umbrella to pick up the fish in his bowl, suggesting that they play a game called Up, Up, Up with a fish. He takes his balance act even further by balancing even more objects while standing on a ball saying, "Look at me, I'm the cat." He then suddenly begins to lose his balance, causing all the objects to come crashing down with him, along with the fish, who lands in a pot and shouts, "Do I like this? Oh no, I do not." The cat continues to cause problems when he releases Thing 1 and Thing 2 from his red crate, and the two begin to wreak havoc around the house, breaking dishes and causing a spring to come out from an armchair. The riders then go into a closet where several special effects and lights indicate that Thing 1 and Thing 2 are further wrecking the house. The unnamed boy, fed up with Thing 1 and Thing 2, grabs his net and traps both of them, which saddens the cat, who prepares to leave. The house is now a mess, and with no way to clean it up before Mom gets home, the fish becomes very upset. The cat then returns, driving a large machine, saying, "Have no fear," as he begins to clean up the house with the help of the machine. He and the things leave as Mom arrives, who asks the kids what they did today. As the cat and the things are seen bidding farewell from an outside window, the unnamed boy asks the riders, "Well, what would you do if your mother asked you?" This ride is really a lot of fun. As stated earlier, it is based heavily on the hit book, and much of the dialogue being narrated comes directly from it. Several scenes are also taken directly from the book, including the boy and Sally's mother walking in the door at the end. One major difference between the book and the ride is that the ride goes into much more detail with Thing 1 and Thing 2's chaos around the house. This is the only attraction at Seuss Landing that I would label as an absolute must ride. Like I said, it's a signature ride in this area of the park, and it is really enjoyable and one that guests have to experience whenever they are in Seuss Landing. Leaving Seuss Landing, guests will arrive in one of the saddest areas of the park. I say sad because it's honestly bittersweet. The Lost Continent, and the word lost is at this point very accurate. Once one of the best themed lands in any theme park in the world, this was the land which former Disney Imagineers constructed based loosely on the ideas for Beastly Kingdom. If you want more information about that, check out our Expedition to Animal Kingdom video, which I've linked above. The land also once hosted one of the best roller coasters to ever exist, Dueling Dragons, and was one of the true highlights of the park. However, times change, and the acquisition of valuable intellectual properties can cause theme parks to undergo dramatic transformations. This land is one of the biggest examples of just that. Once Universal acquired the theme park rights to Harry Potter, the Lost Continent was reduced to a shell of its former glory in order to make room for the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, Hogsmeade. What remains are two attractions: the Mystic Fountain, which is a fountain that interacts with guests and sprays them with water, and Poseidon's Fury, which is an indoor special effects show that closed during COVID-19 and is undergoing a refurbishment. It is not clear what changes will be involved in Poseidon's Fury, so as a result, I do not feel that it would be fair to review the attraction, since the version I would review and give a walkthrough of may not even be the version which exists once the attraction reopens. As it sits, the best thing in the Lost Continent is the Mythos restaurant. Now, as I've said in previous videos, dining within Universal parks is usually not worth it. The food is typically not very good and is usually overpriced. It is much more worth it to leave the park, dine at City Walk, and then return to the park after you have finished eating. However, there are a few exceptions to this, and Mythos is one of those. Mythos is an award-winning restaurant which features modern cuisine in a mythical setting with a mix of Mediterranean, Asian, and American dishes. The exterior of the restaurant features a towering rock formation, cascading waterfalls, and ancient figures carved into the side of the restaurant. This all helps to create the feeling of a craggy grotto. The food is absolutely excellent, garnering an average of 4.4 stars out of 5 on most dining review websites. And at about an average cost of $20 per plate, it's not outrageously overpriced as theme park restaurants are concerned, especially when you consider the quality of the food that you're being served. I would personally recommend dining here at least once during your visits to the park. And that is essentially all that can be said about the Lost Continent. Once an incredible land themed to ancient Greek mythology and heroes from ancient times, it has been reduced to a possible skip. Or should I say, a fast walkthrough. Because, due to the layout of Islands of Adventure, it is virtually impossible to not at least walk through every island making up the park. It is very disappointing to see how far this land has fallen from its former glory. But it is completely understandable when you consider what ultimately replaced parts of the Lost Continent. Obviously, I am talking about the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, Hogsmeade. Themed after every wizard's favorite getaway while studying at Hogwarts, it is an incredibly immersive recreation of the town. The level of detail is just incredible. Just like with Diagon Alley, you truly feel as though you have just walked into the Harry Potter universe. This was the first major expansion to the Islands of Adventure and opened on June 18th of 2010. It features many recreations of shops and restaurants from the movies and novels, including Dervish and Bangs, Honeydukes, Ollivanders, the Three Broomsticks, and the Hog's Head. As mentioned in our Universal Studios Ride the Movies video, which I have linked above, the Hogwarts Express provides guests who have a park-to-park ticket transportation between Hogsmeade and Diagon Alley over at Universal Studios. Again, reference back to the Universal Studios Ride the Movies video if you want to know more about the Hogwarts Express, because in that video, I covered this attraction in depth. Hogsmeade also hosts a junior roller coaster called Flight of the Hippogriff, which used to be known as the Flying Unicorn back when the land was still the Lost Continent. It's just your average kiddie coaster, nothing really special about it. I will say though, that this coaster is an excellent way to introduce young children to the fun of roller coasters as a whole. So with that out of the way, we can move on to the two e-ticket attractions within Hogsmeade. The first of these is Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure. But we cannot talk about this attraction without mentioning the iconic roller coaster which came before it, which was Dueling Dragons. When Dueling Dragons closed in 2010, it was first rethemed to a coaster known as Dragon's Challenge. This retheming saw guests choosing to ride either the Chinese Fireball Dragon or the Hungarian Horntail Dragon in one of the challenges for the Triwizard Cup tournament. The retheming and new story was viewed favorably among guests, as it still maintained the concept of the original Dueling Dragons, which was two side-by-side coasters providing two different experiences, but that crossed at various points. In total, Dueling Dragons and Dragon Challenge were ranked in the Amusement Today Golden Ticket Awards Top 50 Steel Roller Coasters every year of their existence, peaking at number 11 in 2002. Dragon Challenge closed on September 4th of 2017 and underwent the $300 million transformation into Hagrid's Magical Creatures motorbike adventure, which surpassed Expedition Everest over in Animal Kingdom as the most expensive roller coaster ever built. The exterior queue line remains the same as Dragon Challenge, with the exception of the removal of the broken down Ford Anglia, which was incorporated to the ride, and the pennants in support of the Triwizard Champions. Muggles enter the Forbidden Forest by passing under the archway entrance, where they encounter signs along the way. A ring-shaped path leads to a bridge over the exit pathway. Heading towards Flight of the Hippogriff, there is a flying horse made out of wood. Approaching a long switchback section, Muggles see huts, pumpkin patches, and farming equipment. After passing a rose garden, Muggles cross the bridge and access the castle. Muggles enter a room with cages and several murals, such as Buckbeak and Ravenclaw. While walking down the hallway, there is a Dueling Club mural with ice and fire dragons, which pays tribute to Dragon Challenge. After this, Muggles head into a switchback room with a fireplace, pieces of wood, kitchenware, and salamander footprints. This is followed by another storage room containing dragon eggs and more murals. Then, Muggles follow some dark hallways. Getting closer, they spot a test seat and a screen that shows the safety instructions. The theme of the ride is that Hagrid will be taking Muggles on a very special Care of Magical Creatures class and has inquired the help of Arthur Weasley in order to tinker with Hagrid's motorbike, whose original owner is mentioned to be Sirius Black, in an attempt to duplicate it in order to take Muggles to the edge of the Forbidden Forest. After boarding the ride vehicles, the coaster begins by turning right out of the loading station. Afterwards, the vehicles hit the first launch, which accelerates from 0 to 20 miles per hour in 1.2 seconds. It moves through an S-curve slope and makes a right turn, and then hits the second launch, accelerating from 22 miles per hour to 30 miles per hour in 1.5 seconds. Hagrid says he will meet up with the Muggles at an abandoned hut at the edge of the Forbidden Forest. Once the bikes reach Hagrid's hut, a blast-ended Skrewt sprays smoke at the riders as the giant himself tells them they'll pick up the rest of the lesson later. The vehicles exit the hut by turning right, which leads into the third launch from 0 to 32 miles per hour in 3.5 seconds. The vehicles head up an airtime hill, passing by the abandoned castle and making a left-handed dive into a tunnel. Following a series of turns, the vehicle approaches the fourth launch, which accelerates from 27 miles per hour to 35 miles per hour in 2.3 seconds. The vehicles then make a right turn and slow down on the mid-course brake run. Fluffy can be found on the left side. The vehicle then turns left past a switch track and accelerates from 21 miles per hour to 41 miles per hour in 2.1 seconds. They speed into a tunnel. After the tunnel, they rise up a 65-foot tall 70-degree vertical spike before losing power and dropping backwards, now accelerating from 37 miles per hour to 44 miles per hour in 1.7 seconds. It speeds through another tunnel and into a helix. The vehicle slowed down in the darkest part of the Forbidden Forest as the Muggles pass a centaur, stopping in the tentacles of Devil's Snare. Hagrid encourages the Muggles to say the incantation Lumo Solemn, and then they free fall 17 feet into a cave filled with glowing blast-ended Skrewts, which are all around the riders. The vehicles then exit the building and approach the final launch, accelerating from 0 to 50 miles per hour in 4 seconds. The vehicles hit a left bank turn and pass the on-ride camera, which takes photos of the guests. After this, the vehicle makes a right turn before stopping at the abandoned castle, where a unicorn and her baby are spotted, thus ending the ride. This coaster is excellent. It's one of the highest rated attractions at the park, and for good reason. The true genius is how Universal found a way to blend a roller coaster with immersive theming and storytelling. Something that Disney has done in the past to an extent, but nothing like this. Expedition Everest does come to mind as a comparison, but even with that, the theming on Expedition Everest is mainly restricted to the mountain and to the single Yeti animatronic, whereas this attraction shows many animatronics of magical creatures found in the Harry Potter universe. The track layout features 7 launches, more than any other roller coaster in the world. It is also only the second coaster in the United States to feature a vertical drop of nearly 17 feet, and it is the longest coaster in Florida, measuring nearly a mile in overall track length. It also features a unique spike, which catapults guests 65 feet into the air at a more than 70-degree angle, followed by a backwards drop, all in one single movement. The ride has been awarded the Golden Ticket Award for Best New Attraction by Amusement Today in 2019 and was awarded second place for Best New Roller Coaster. This coaster is absolutely incredible and is an obvious must-ride on my rating scale. It easily beats most other coasters offered in Orlando, aside from the Velocicoaster. It easily beats any roller coaster offerings in Disney World, including Expedition Everest. Just make sure you don't miss this attraction so long as you can get into the virtual queue line. That now brings us to the signature attraction of the Wizarding World of Harry Potter Hogsmeade, Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey. This attraction takes guests through the Hogwarts Castle and board a scenic dark ride. To enter the ride, guests walk through the gates of Hogwarts and begin their journey in the dungeons, where they see items featured in the movies and books. Passengers enter through the castle doors, go to the lockers, queue outside in the greenhouse, and then re-enter through the back castle doors. Objects recognizable from the series include the Mirror of Erised, the Hogwarts House Jewels, and the talking portraits which feature the founders of Hogwarts. As guests proceed through the hallways, they encounter replicas of the rooms of Hogwarts Castle, including the headmaster's office, the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom, and the Gryffindor common room. In the headmaster's office, Professor Dumbledore extends a warm welcome to all Muggles, informing them that Professor Binns is hosting a lecture on the history of the school. In the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom, Harry, Ron, and Hermione appear from under the invisibility cloak, urging guests to meet them in the room of requirement in order to sneak everyone down to a Quidditch match. Before continuing on, visitors receive a safety reminder from the Sorting Hat and from several paintings in the next two rooms. Riders then board an Omnimover-style bench inside the room of requirement. The ride begins with a dousing of flu powder from Hermione Granger, and the enchanted bench flies off through the flu network to the astronomy tower. The guests leave the room of requirement through its fireplace and enter the observatory, where they look out through the open arches to the hills and lake outside the Hogwarts boundary. As the guests fly out of one of the observatory's arches, the ride smoothly switches to a wraparound projection screen, and they follow Harry Potter and Ron Weasley around the buildings and towers to a Quidditch match. Hagrid hails the riders and asks them if they have seen a dragon. As Harry redirects the riders' attentions back to their journey, Hagrid's pet Hungarian horntail dragon begins to chase the riders. The bench flies out of the projection screen and into a set of the uneven bridge that crosses the valley behind Hogwarts, and after falling out of a hole in the floor of the bridge, they encounter an animatronic dragon, which breathes pressurized water mist with red lighting to make it resemble fire. The riders descend into a set of the Forbidden Forest where they encounter a figure of Aragog, a large, sentient spider who spits water at them. As Hermione tries to help the riders away from Aragog and towards the castle, where they encounter many spiders along the way, they encounter an animatronic Whomping Willow, which swipes at them, knocking them into the Quidditch pitch. The ride then turns to another projection screen as they become caught up in Harry and Ron's game of Quidditch. As Slytherin scores into Gryffindor's goal, Dementors arrive at the Quidditch pitch, and Harry attempts to lead the riders away through the structure of the pitch and back to the school. But their bench falls into the long-abandoned Chamber of Secrets through a cave entrance in a cliff, which Harry, Ron, Ginny, Fawkes, and Gilderoy Lockhart departed through in the second Harry Potter novel and film. The riders then return to a real set as the Dementors appear from the pipelines and chase them. The skeleton of the long-deceased basilisk lies on the floor of the chamber and expels Lord Voldemort's Dark Mark into the air as the benches are drawn into the mouth of Salazar Slytherin's statue. Dozens of Dementors emerge from the darkness, while one descends and attempts to suck out the riders' souls. Harry causes the Dementors to flee with a protective Patronus charm. After the final Dementor, and while Harry uses his Patronus, the riders enter the final video dome segment where the cliffs outside the Chamber of Secrets cave in. They fly over the Black Lake, back into Hogwarts, and through the main hall and grand staircase, where they are cheered by a series of on-screen characters from the movies who appear three-dimensional. Professor Dumbledore sends everyone back through the Floo network to the Room of Requirement, where they exit their bench. This ride is phenomenal. Think Rise of the Resistance over at Hollywood Studios, but instead themed to Harry Potter. The animatronics and live sets are incredibly immersive. Combine that with the screen technology, much like the Simpsons ride over at Universal Studios, except for the fact that this attraction uses multiple screens, each of which are perfectly synced with the ride vehicle, making you feel as though you are truly flying on an enchanted bench. An interesting fact is that when this ride opened over at Universal Studios in Japan, the screen projections were in 3D. However, it became very apparent to Universal that having 3D elements on this attraction made it way too intense. So, the 3D element was completely removed, with the ride being brought back to its original state, which is where it's at today. This ride has won the Golden Ticket Award for Best Dark Ride for 5 consecutive years, from 2011 to 2015, before finishing second to the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror from 2016 to 2019. On our last visit, my wife went on this attraction at least 5 times, and I went on it 3 times. So, it will not shock anyone that I am telling you that this is an absolute must ride on every visit to the park. Overall, the Wizarding World of Harry Potter Hogsmeade is excellent. This, combined with the Diagon Alley section over in Universal Studios, are the most immersive theme park lands anywhere in the world. While the Lost Continent was one of the most immersive theme park lands ever created, Hogsmeade completely surpasses it. However, I do have to admit that between the two Wizarding World areas encompassing both parks, they both have positives and negatives. For me, I feel like Hogsmeade has much better attractions, but Diagon Alley has better overall theming. But when you put the two together, you obviously get one of the best theme park experiences you will find anywhere in the world. While losing the Lost Continent did not go over well with fans of the theme park, the land which replaced it has obviously been a huge success. As explained in our Universal Studios Ride the Movies video, the Wizarding World of Harry Potter was what finally saw a Universal park outperform a Disney World park in terms of attendance numbers. Leaving Hogsmeade, guests will arrive in Jurassic Park. Themed after the hit movie series, the land currently takes place after the events of the first Jurassic Park film. I say currently because Universal is in the process of retheming the area to Jurassic World, a process which saw the construction of the Velocicoaster. The land also features exhibits which someone would find in the actual theme park shown in the Jurassic Park films. Camp Jurassic is a children's play area that features slides, nets, water cannons, and fountains. The Jurassic Park Discovery Center is an interactive play area where people can learn about how dinosaurs existed. One of the main features of the Discovery Center is the main hatchery. This is where guests can view scientists at work, filling out forms, and examining eggs. Obviously, this is just done with actors and animatronics, but it adds to the illusion that guests have entered the real Jurassic Park. A short description of the animal is then given, followed by where the animal can be found on Isla Nebula. Randomly, throughout the day, one can view a dinosaur hatching. A preemptive warning is given over the intercom that a hatching is about to begin, and one of the technicians comes over and guides one through the hatching. The female velociraptor hatchling, handled by an actor who is played by a paleobiologist, is then given a name by the children and the adults who are present. The velociraptor is a complex animatronic model similar to the actual animatronics used in the Jurassic Park films. There are no designated show times, and catching a hatching baby dinosaur is based upon luck in order to add to the realism of the experience. Because, in real life, there are obviously no guaranteed times when any animal would hatch from an egg. Going back in time, Triceratops' encounter was an attraction which opened in 1999 and was featured in many promotional films for the park. The experience allowed guests to visit 3 Triceratops currently under veterinary care. It mimicked the scene from the first Jurassic Park film of the vet taking care of a sick Triceratops. However, due to the maintenance costs of the animatronics and due to their deterioration, the attraction would close in 2010 and remain closed for many years before being replaced with something that, let's just say, has a bit more teeth. However, I mentioned it now because there is currently an experience where guests can meet a dinosaur. Raptor Encounter takes character meet and greets to a whole new level. Located near the River Adventure attraction and opening in 2015, I honestly cannot recommend this attraction for small children because it gives a feeling of approaching a large and unpredictable raptor, which can be very scary and very intimidating. Fans of Jurassic World will recognize this raptor as Blue. And she displays aggressive behavior, such as lunging and snapping at guests. It is extremely realistic, combining an incredibly detailed animatronic with realistic movements and sounds. I personally enjoyed it, and the photo opportunity is great. But the one gripe I have is that people were actually bringing small children close up to the raptor, which, in my personal opinion, should not occur because of the intensity of the animatronic. But that's just my opinion, so take it as you choose. Until very recently, and by very recently, I mean as of June of 2021, Jurassic Park River Adventure was the signature attraction in this land of the park. The queue for this ride serves as a welcome center to Jurassic Park, with a tropical landscape and a covered walkway leading you up to your river tour boat. After boarding your boat, the first part of the tour is very relaxing and smooth, giving guests the opportunity to get an up-close and personal moment with several of the most grand herbivore dinosaurs. The Ultrasaurus, the Psittasaurus, and Stegosaurus. Now, up to this point, like I said, it's very relaxing. However, something soon goes horribly wrong. The ride vehicle then begins to head towards a part of the park known as Hadrosaur Cove. Another dinosaur pokes its head up from the water and shoots water from its nose onto the guests. Seconds later, another startled dinosaur jars the raft, causing it to drift into the raptor containment area, which is shown to be heavily damaged. This is where the calmness of the ride ends. Jurassic Park Animal Control addresses the riders through loudspeakers, telling them to stop the raft and get to a safe place. Off in the jungle area to the right, raptors can be heard rustling the bushes and plants. The raft passes a replica of the raptor pen from the film, and riders hear snarling velociraptors in the dense foliage, whose branches move to simulate the creature trying to escape the confines. A large hole is torn into the wires of the fence. Two smaller dinosaurs are seen fighting over a bloody crew shirt, and guests can see the boat which Animal Control sent to guide the riders towards a safe area. The raft then heads towards the water treatment plant, where riders see a velociraptor run into a dark corner. A large crate with something snarling inside, possibly a raptor, nearly falls and crushes the guests. The riders then begin to slowly head up a steep hill into a large building in silence and darkness. The riders then enter a dark tunnel with several pipes near the ceiling. To the right of the raptors, there is a shadow of two raptors growling inside a pen. A velociraptor now jumps out of a dark corner and begins squealing and clawing at a gate sparking with electricity. Another raptor is seen jumping up from a control panel and snarls at the guests. As the raft follows a short drop and right turn, sirens begin blazing loudly due to an evacuation, only to eerily stop seconds later. A loud roar then can be heard, and three large fingered claw marks can be seen ripping through the wall. In front of the riders is a couple of flashing lights, as well as mist and fog. Seconds later, the head of a Tyrannosaurus Rex appears in front of the riders, roaring and growling. It roars very loudly and then bends over, snapping its jaws, and then raises its mouth towards the ceiling. As the Tyrannosaurus bends its head down to try to eat the riders, the raft plunges down an 85-foot drop and the on-ride photo is taken. Once back in the cove, the ride vehicles return to the unloading station and the ride ends. This is a legendary ride, and it's still as good now as it was back when the park opened in 1999. It takes a simple log flume concept and elevates it with incredible storytelling, lifelike animatronics, stunning visual effects, and tremendous thrills. It is so much fun that anytime I go to the park, I can't go on it just once. I have to experience it multiple times because it's just that good. Needless to say, this is an absolute must ride on every visit to Islands of Adventure. However, it is important to note that sometime in the future, this ride will be closed as it undergoes a retheming to Jurassic World, which is part of the previously mentioned project Universal is undertaking in order to transform the entire land to theme with the new Jurassic World movies. Finally, we arrive at the newest attraction at Islands of Adventure, and this one is the true apex predator of roller coasters. The Velocicoaster is located where Triceratops Encounter once stood, opening on June 10th of 2021. The queue begins outside the lower floor of the Discovery Center. Two raptor statues are on display at the entrance. Inside, guests see more raptor statues and eventually move into a room with 4 windows overlooking the ride track. A video projection special effect is used to show velociraptors chasing each coaster train as it passes by. Inside one of the windows, guests can find a clipboard and a radar gun. In another is a cup with permanent ripples referencing the first Jurassic Park film. Guests then enter a room with a video presentation by Dr. Henry Wu. There are a few lockers with various items, such as football equipment, raptor toys, and books. Guests then enter an examination room where two animatronic velociraptors are caged and muzzled. The examination room is followed by the lockers area, where guests can secure their loose articles. They are unique for their two-way design, in which a door swings open on one side to insert the belongings, and then swings open on the other side as guests exit the ride in order to retrieve them. After passing the metal detectors, guests walk up a flight of stairs into a final pre-show displaying a video with characters Claire Dearing and Owen Grady. In the video, Grady rebukes the idea of taking a ride on Velocicoaster and tries to discourage guests as well. The room features various Jurassic World props on display, including zappers, net guns, a waiver, and a dino tracker. Guests then reach the station where they board the train. The loading area is to the west of the queue, and once exiting the station, riders take an S-turn before arriving at the pre-launch sequence, where Owen warns the riders one last time, and the velociraptors can be seen on either side of the track. As the velociraptors escape, riders are launched from 0 to 50 miles per hour in 2 seconds. Immediately after the launch track, the train passes through a junior Immelman and through some rock work. The train then dives down and back up through a dive loop. The ride then rises through the rock work via a turnaround and completes a downward S-bend. Following a slow outer banked hill, the ride enters its second launch, propelling riders from 40 miles per hour to 70 miles per hour in 2.4 seconds. The ride climbs to its tallest point, a 155-foot top hat. The ride then plummets down 140-foot drop at an 80-degree angle and turns to the right and snaps back to the left to complete the 100-foot-long zero-G stall. Following this, the ride enters its signature element, a heartline roll, dubbed the Mosasaurus roll, at 53 miles per hour. This is followed by an off-axis airtime hill before reaching the brake run. As the train returns to the station, Owen thanks the riders before being called over to a situation that is happening at the River Adventure. This coaster is easily the best roller coaster in the world. The theming, the ride experience, the track layout, just everything makes this an absolute must ride. It gives the opposite feeling of the Incredible Hulk over at Marvel Superhero Island. The Hulk gives a G-force feeling, which feels as if you are stuck to your seat. However, the Velocicoaster gives guests what is called a negative G-force feeling. Negative G-force, for those who do not know, occurs if you accelerate downwards faster than the rate of a natural free fall. As you accelerate, your blood moves slower than the solid parts of your body due to the inertia of blood, resulting in a feeling of weightlessness. This makes the ride experience and after effects much more pleasant than the after effects of a traditional G-force coaster like the Hulk. With a 155-foot tall drop, 4 inversions, 2 high-speed launches, and reaching a maximum speed of 70 miles per hour, the coaster easily won the Golden Ticket Award for Best New Roller Coaster in 2021 and was a huge factor in Universal Orlando Resort being named Theme Park of the Year by Gary Slade, who is the editor-in-chief of Amusement Today. Overall, Jurassic Park is one of my favorite lands within Islands of Adventure. Just the theming, the rides, the entire experience is really amazing. Maybe it's just because of the fact that I grew up with the Jurassic Park movies, and it kind of gives me a rush of nostalgia. But with that said, I personally do not think that this land gets as much attention as it should in terms of how people rate and rank theme park lands. It immerses you in the story of the movies and makes you feel as if you're at Isla Nebula, and I am very excited to see what this land looks like once the transformation to Jurassic World is completely finished. Leaving Jurassic Park, guests will arrive in the newest island of the park, Skull Island, which, to be completely honest, I have a real difficult time including as an entire separate land due to the fact that the whole land is basically just one attraction. And that's why, whenever I talk about the park, I tend to mention this as just a separate standalone attraction as opposed to a full-on island. Nevertheless, the one attraction located in this area of the park is yet another huge hit for Universal as King Kong finally makes his long-awaited return to the parks for the first time since the closure of Confrontation at Universal Studios back in 2002. Opening in 2016, it is a trackless dark ride integrating 3D effects from screens all around the ride vehicle. I really hate to make this comparison, but the screen technology is pretty similar to what you find in Fast and the Furious Supercharged, but it's so much better, with the obvious integration of 3D alongside a whole host of other improvements. I mean, it doesn't even compare to the disaster that is Fast and the Furious. To me, this attraction was Universal correcting the mistakes they made with that atrocity of an attraction over at Universal Studios and perfecting the technology, constructing an absolutely incredible ride here at Islands of Adventure. Guests enter an expedition truck with one of 5 different drivers, each one containing their own backstory and dialogue for the ride. They are warned of the island's dangers as they enter the 80-foot tall temple as natives from Skull Island chant King Kong's name. The ride slows down and passes by the bones of a giant ape, as well as a few bat-like animatronics. Guests then turn and meet the other expedition group who are getting ready to set up a camp. However, guests are attacked by a swarm of Mordocs, one of which snatches up Kate, who is one of the few named explorers. She is taken over the truck and out of the view of the riders. Both trucks speed off, following Kate in order to rescue her. In the back of the cave, a shadow of Kong can be seen. The expedition trucks then move on to a swamp where they encounter giant bugs such as worm-like Carnictus and arachno claws. Kate manages to escape and fights off the creatures that threaten her and the riders. After defending the truck for a few moments, she tells them to go without her, but the driver refuses to leave. Right before she is able to jump onto the truck, a Deplector's claw reaches out and grabs her, dragging her into a cave as she struggles to escape. They later encounter small carnivorous dinosaurs who chase the truck as it speeds away and tries to escape, but ends up crashing and walking up a group of larger dinosaurs. A Vestasaurus Rex kills a few of the Venatosaurus, causing them to scatter. The V-Rexes begin attacking the truck, but before the truck can be badly damaged, Kong leaps from behind a temple and begins to fight the dinosaurs. Kong and the dinosaurs continue to fight when the truck from earlier shows up to help the riders. Unfortunately, both trucks end up falling into a pit because of the weakening walkway. They swing from vines while Kong faces the last V-Rex and causes both the other truck and the dinosaur to fall, but saves the truck, allowing the crew to survive the fall. The truck then plummets, but is also saved by Kong, who roars and climbs away. The driver sends out a report that the truck had found Kong, and the truck drives and meets Kong in an animatronic form, who sniffs at the riders and stares at them, but then roars, causing the driver to quickly speed away. The ride vehicle returns to base camp, where Kate radios that she and the others are now safe. As I said earlier, this ride is another huge hit for Universal. It perfected the technology they attempted to use in Fast and the Furious, added 3D, and created a truly incredible experience. It is a more than worthy return for King Kong to the Universal Parks, one which fans who have waited for the true King of Beasts to return will not be disappointed in. Needless to say, this is yet another must-ride on each visit to the park. There isn't much more I can say about Skull Island. As I said, the entire land is encompassed by one attraction, which is why I don't usually consider it to be a separate island, but instead a standalone attraction. I mean, the attraction is great, but aside from that, there is nothing else located in this so-called land of the park. Leaving Skull Island, guests will step right into their favorite newspaper comic strips as they enter Toon Lagoon, another incredibly themed area which is known for its unique photo spots, standing under a speech or thought bubble which have fun phrases written inside them. However, this area of the park has remained largely unchanged since the opening of Islands of Adventure in 1999. The issue is that Universal prioritizes the various lands and attractions within their theme parks by the amount of foot traffic they receive throughout the day. While this is completely understandable from a business perspective, lands like this and Seuss Landing rarely undergo any changes, if at all, and are usually the last lands to have refurbishments done to their respective attractions. That said, the land does feature 2 different attractions. Popeye and Bluto's Bilge Rat Barges is a very underrated water raft ride, which will get you soaked, making it the perfect attraction to go on when visiting the park on a really hot Florida day. It doesn't get the same attention in Orlando as similar attractions like Cali River Rapids over at Animal Kingdom, but I personally find it to be a lot of fun and feel that it doesn't get the amount of respect which it deserves. The signature attraction in this area of the park is Dudley Do-Right's Ripsaw Falls. This ride is essentially a log flume, which has been elevated using theming based on the hit cartoon and newspaper comic series. Once passengers have been placed in the log, it enters the first room, where light shines on forest animals in a black and white color scheme while instruments are played, in a parody of Splash Mountain and the former Tales of the Okinawa ride at Six Flags Over Georgia. The log turns to the right and starts up the first chain lift hill, while Dudley is seen riding horse backwards up the slope alongside the riders. Snidely is later seen riding a mine cart down the other side of the lift, laughing at his accomplishment of kidnapping Nell. The route takes the ride outdoors before taking a turn and entering Want Ya Be Mine. Dudley tells Horse that he can't see anything, but riders can see that a large bear is behind him. Next, the ride passes by Snidely, who is tying Yell with a rope to the train tracks. The ride then passes by Horse and Inspector Fenwick, both of whom are also tied to the tracks. The ride then enters a cave where a giant train light is seen and the sound of the engine is heard, parodying a scene from Mr. Toad's Wild Ride over in Disneyland. After the light goes out, the log drops into a small airtime hill before splashing down, drenching riders. Passengers then travel into an outdoor sawmill where Nell is tied to a log that is headed for a rotating buzzsaw while Snidely and Dudley fight over the lever which operates the conveyor. After dropping down to ground level, riders are shown signs telling them to turn around. The ride then climbs the second lift hill, and at the crest, the ride enters Snidely's lair. At this, Nell fires Snidely from a cannon. We see Dudley triumphantly place his foot on a dynamite plunger, setting off an explosion. The ride then makes its climatic drop, plunging 75 feet into a dynamite shack. When the log is under the shack explodes, spraying passengers and spectators with water. The ride then climbs its last hill, which drops guests into a splashdown pool. Next, the ride curves towards 9 hoses. The ride then enters the Alatanapu Island prison, where Snidely is being held. He attempts to convince a beaver holding the key to give the keys to him, which is a parody of the Pirates of the Caribbean ride in Disney parks. The log passes through one last scene where Dudley is being awarded a medal by Inspector Fenwick for capturing Snidely and saving his daughter Nell. This ride is a lot of fun. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a must ride, but it is one you should try to experience at least once. I do feel it uses too many scenes to mock Disney rides, but I do feel that this attraction is actually better than its Disney World counterpart, which would be Splash Mountain. I just feel that this ride has better overall theming and better storytelling than Splash Mountain does. I feel that this ride is highly underrated around theme park circles, and it should get more respect than it does. Overall, I feel that Toon Lagoon is sort of a letdown. Aside from the 2 attractions, there's really nothing else to see in this area of the park. Which is sad, because back when the park first opened, I can remember this land being very popular, but sadly, its age does show, and unfortunately, Universal has not made any announcements in terms of adding more attractions to this area of the park. And it's a real shame too, because I feel like a marquee attraction in this area would help to elevate the other 2 attractions currently in Toon Lagoon, which, as I said, are underrated and do not get really the respect that they deserve. This now brings us to the final land of the park, and it's one of the best. Marvel's Superhero Island. This is a land which we mentioned in the history part of this video that resulted from one of the worst business deals in theme park history. The island's architecture and theming makes you feel as though you have dropped right into a Marvel comic book, complete with a comic book color scheme, amplified angles, and cutouts of the most popular Marvel characters. The land hosts 4 attractions, 2 of which we will highlight. The 2 we will not are Doctor Doom's Fearfall, which is a space shot concept ride themed after the main villain in the Fantastic Four series. It's okay, but it does not have much theming, And really, it cannot compete with, say, the Tower of Terror. I mean, it's fine for what it is, but it's really nothing special. Storm Force Acceleration is a teacup ride themed after the X-Men, which honestly I only feel exists in order to keep the X-Men out of Disney World as per the terms of the Marvel Universal contract, where Disney cannot have any rides or attractions based on any Marvel characters or family of characters which are currently at Marvel Superhero Island, anywhere east of the Mississippi River. Now, we come to the two attractions we will highlight. The first is the Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man. This is the ride which was originally going to be based on Superman before the deal with DC Comics fell through and Universal signed with Marvel instead. It is a 3D motion-based dark ride, which was considered to be a huge technological achievement, integrating 3D film, ride movement, and special effects for the first time when it opened with the park in 1999. It took Universal 3 years to develop the attraction. The queue sees guests enter the Daily Bugle, and guests are shown a video in which the company's good reputation is touted, and a new high-tech news gathering vehicle called the Scoop is introduced. After walking through the empty office, guests see a live video feed of news coverage. 5 supervillains, led by Dr. Octopus, have laid siege to the city using an experimental anti-gravity cannon the Doctor has created. Collectively, the group is called the Sinister Syndicate, and they have stolen the Statue of Liberty and are threatening to destroy it if the city does not surrender to them. As the guests continue through the Bugle's offices, it becomes apparent that the reporters have fled, leaving Editor-in-Chief Jonah Jameson no choice but to send the guests to cover the story using the Bugle's new Scoop vehicle. After putting on the night vision goggles, which are the 3D glasses, the Cub reporters get in the Scoop and leave the loading docks to go to Manhattan, where they go to a back alley, which is the place where they encounter Spider-Man. He warns that he is in for the most dangerous night of his life, and for the guests to be careful. In this scene, a series of synchronized effects are used to simulate Spider-Man jumping onto the Scoop. Nearly missing a trash truck driven by a Stan Lee cameo, the guests enter a warehouse where the Sinister Syndicate are holding the Statue of Liberty hostage. Once spotted, Electro tries to shock the guests with a sparking wire. The Scoop absorbs the electricity and vibrates, knocking Electro backwards. After this, Scream tries to shred the guests as Dr. Octopus pulls her out of the way and fires his anti-gravity ray at the Scoop. Guests then enter the sewers where Spider-Man is waiting. However, Hydro Man appears behind him as he slams a pipe into the Scoop while Spider-Man attacks him. Following this, Dr. Octopus busts through a brick wall and grabs the Scoop's front bumper, preparing to attack with a fiery claw. The bumper breaks loose, causing Dr. Octopus to stumble backwards. Then, the Scoop approaches the river, where Hobgoblin tries to attack the guests with his pumpkin bombs. Spider-Man comes to catch one of the incoming pumpkin bombs, but Hobgoblin throws another bomb as a fireball explodes above the guests. The Scoop is then sent into the streets, where Spider-Man fights Dr. Octopus. In the ride's climax, Dr. Octopus lifts the Scoop up to a simulated height of 400 feet using the anti-gravity cannon. A number of synchronized effects help to achieve this without the vehicle ever leaving the ground, including a movable building set, lighting cues, simulator movements, projections, and wind effects. Spider-Man attempts to pull the Scoop down, but he is attacked by all the supervillains. Spider-Man thwarts them, but not before Dr. Octopus damages the anti-gravity device, sending the Scoop on a simulated freefall until it is rescued by Spider-Man's webbing right above the ground. Spider-Man captures all the supervillains using his webs, and Dr. Octopus unsuccessfully tries to attack him one last time. As the vehicle pulls into the unload station, Spider-Man thanks the guests for their help and sends them back to the Daily Bugle, where he has rigged the anti-gravity cannon to lift Jameson up to the ceiling in his office. Guests unload while a modern rendition of the classic Spider-Man theme song plays, and a voiceover of Stan Lee instructs the riders on exiting properly. I know I keep saying this about rides at this park, but this attraction is incredible. Even going on 22 years later, the technology of the ride holds up really well. I would almost call it Universal's Pirates of the Caribbean, because it has aged like fine wine and is, in my opinion, timeless. If it's still running in another 20 years, it will still be a can't-miss ride. It's truly legendary, as evidenced by the ride winning the Golden Ticket Award for Best Dark Ride for 12 consecutive years from 1999 to 2010, before finally getting beat out by another Islands of Adventure dark ride, Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey. Just think about that for a second. This ride is so good that it took the creation of a much more expensive ride within the same theme park in order to finally dethrone it after 12 years. In 12 years, the only ones who could top Universal in terms of dark rides was Universal themselves. Even Disney has been unable to construct a dark ride which could compete with the Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man in now going on 22 years since it has opened. If that is not enough evidence that this is an absolute must-ride, I don't know what is. The final attraction we will cover in this video is the Incredible Hulk roller coaster. The story behind this coaster is that designers of the ride wanted to simulate being fired out of a cannon and began investigating how to achieve this in January of 1995. It would take Universal's design team 2 years to figure out how to achieve this desired feeling, and another year to physically construct the roller coaster itself. Obviously, from that, you can figure out that the Incredible Hulk coaster was the debut attraction at the park in 1999. The coaster features 7 inversions and reaches a top speed of 67 miles per hour, with the launch propelling riders up a 110-foot tall hill. But before getting to that, the queue sees guests stepping into a storyline involving a perilous science experiment led by General Thaddeus Rodd, in which he is attempting to copy the dangerous chemical and radiation combination which turned Bruce Banner into the Incredible Hulk. After going through the queue, guests enter the ride vehicles, which are going to transport them through the Gamma Ray Accelerator. Guests are then launched through a tunnel of bright lights, reaching 40 miles per hour in 2 seconds. From there, guests will experience a total of 7 inversions and go through 2 subterranean trenches. Guests are eventually turned upside down as they go through a zero-gravity roll at 67 miles per hour on its way back to the loading station. The 2-minute 15-second experience travels along 3,700 feet of track and achieves a G-force level of 4 with a maximum drop height of 104.9 feet. These statistics are still impressive even 22 years later. I will be honest, this is my favorite roller coaster in the world. I know that Velocicoaster is newer and has updated technology, but there is just something about this coaster that moves it to the top of my coaster list. It's truly exhilarating. The feeling of the G-force is incredible. The track layout is absolutely perfect. There are just no real flaws with this coaster at all. It's just excellent. And considering this coaster recently underwent a retheming of the story and had new track installed, this is one that will continue to thrill guests for many years to come. This is yet another Islands of Adventure must ride. Make sure you take the time to experience this legendary coaster on your next visit to the park. And that brings us to the end of the video. Islands of Adventure was the world's most technologically advanced theme park when it opened in 1999 and still holds that title today. It's my favorite theme park in the world, and it seems like it just overwhelms you with hit attraction after hit attraction. From Velocicoaster to Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey, to Skull Island Reign of Kong, to Spider-Man and the Hulk. It's just really crazy to think about how many e-ticket attractions Universal has placed inside this theme park. You could easily spend days in this park and never get bored. Each island has something for everyone to enjoy. Whereas Universal Studios' mantra is ride the movies, Islands of Adventure literally puts you inside of the movies with its incredibly themed lands and extraordinary rides. Universal is currently in the process of opening a new theme park in Orlando called Epic Universes, which is rumored to be even better than Islands of Adventure. If this ends up being true, then Disney World has huge problems going forward because it's already hard enough for any theme park to compare to the Islands of Adventure. Overall, Universal Orlando Resort has come a very long way from its disastrous beginnings in 1990. With Islands of Adventure being added to the overall resort in 1999, Universal has solidified itself over the years, not only as a worthy competitor to Disney World, but as one of the top resort destinations in the world. With that said, thanks for watching, everyone.